Escobar, and I want to talk a little bit about INOS, our think tank, and of course, the study that we have started and to which you have been invited, and we have titled the Observatory on Good Regulatory Practices in the Regulation of Pharmaceutical Products. So before getting started, just a few recommendations and some announcements. First of which, there's um, eh, simultaneous interpretation is available both for English and Portuguese, and it's available under the options at the bottom center of your screen. And I also want to invite you to let us know about any question, concern, or recommendation that you may have through the chat that is also enabled in its functions. At the end of the webinar, we want to have a small space for Q&A and to receive any concerns, recommendations, and comments from you all. Thank you so much for attending to this call. Uh, we now have a considerable number of people, and kind of respecting punctuality, we would like to get on with it and with the conversation about what we want the Observatory on Good Regulatory Practices for the regulation of pharmaceutical products to be. As a think tank, we are located in Colombia, and of course, not only operating in Colombia, but in some other regions that already know the work that INOS is doing. But allow me to present a little bit of what INOS is doing so that you know what we're working on and this project, the and how the observatory is constructed, and explain to you some of the phases of the methodology that we are to follow so that this launch is successful, of the findings that we have, and that it hopefully will be useful to you all and to your different entities and associations, and of course the healthcare systems of your countries. INOS is the Institute of Perspective and Innovation in Health. It's a think tank that is promoted and was founded 4 years ago by a joint initiative from AFIDRO, Association of Research and Development in Colombia, and Universidad El Bosque, a university that today is supported by FIFARMA, in a line that has followed a commitment to work not only for Colombia, but for the whole region of Latin America, driving knowledge to support public policy making decisions that improve the dialogue that we have for better health and better innovation in the region. So what are we doing? We're driving content, communications, studies. We are supporting training in different kinds of formats, mainly on innovation and intellectual property. We are promoting spaces of reflection, recognition, analysis, webinars, and different spaces for collaborative work. And of course, we developed a series of special projects and initiatives that are significant, as some recent ones. The Latin Health Champions is an initiative where we called upon innovative solutions from all around the region, all around Latin America, that would have a potential impact that would be relevant on the health care of our countries, and that also would have well understood the importance of intellectual property for the development of these solutions. These allowed us to gather, recognize, make visible, but also accompany three solutions to a trip to the United States, one from Argentina, one from Mexico, and one from Ecuador, in order to strengthen the activity in the region. We have issued an annual report. We're going to the third one, which is mapping all that is happening in the innovation system in Colombia, and that we hope to be very soon launching in other countries, so as to make visible all these innovative solutions for the healthcare of our people, coming from the universities, from the multinational industry, from the national industry, from the think tanks, from research centers, hospitals, clinics, and the government entities. We have developed a portal of the Observatory on Regulatory Policies in Latin America, and we are mapping out and following up on what is happening with the legislative agenda in the countries around the region so that we can identify trends for the construction of regulatory policy making activities. Since last year, we launched the overview on health and innovation, or sorry, the health and innovation outlook in Latin America, which maps out the development of our innovation ecosystems on healthcare and allows us to drive knowledge on good practices and reference both for the region as well as how we benchmark and compare against others globally. We also have a call, which is called a call for reliance, to find people in creative people in our uh, uh, neighboring countries to understand, for instance, reliance, an element that is so important to strengthen our regulatory activities in the region, but which we may have had a difficulty expressing. And now we're trying to see how we can better communicate the importance of reliance as an essential element of improvement. That is a quick look at what we've been doing at INOS with that purpose of supporting innovation and the construction of future for better healthcare systems in Latin America. I want now to move on to tell you a little bit about the Observatory on Good Regulatory Practices. But before going into the matter and explaining what it is about and the objectives that we're looking for with the Observatory, I want to give the floor to Diego Salas, who is the Director of Regulatory Affairs at FIFARMA. And he has accompanied this initiative, and we have consulted him in the design, methodological design, but particularly he has provided, along with the team at FIFARMA, all the support we have needed to make this initiative come true. And let it be said, happy birthday, Diego. Let this be a time to recognize your life, your achievements within the framework of this project too, which I know is of great interest for you guys. Thank you very much, Carlos Felipe. Thank you very much to the whole team at INOS and FIFARMA, and of course, the representatives of the chambers and the associations and the members of industry who have answered this call, this invitation from INOS to be part of the Observatory of Good Regulatory Practices in the Regulation of Pharmaceutical Products, which I believe, Carlos, now that you said it, is undoubtedly one of the best gifts is to see this project materialized, which has been going on for so many years. And it's a true honor for me and for FIFARMA to be able to support this study. We are going to try to understand a little bit more about how it works. But in general terms, it seeks to analyze the perception and the experience of users with respect to the work done by 8 national regulatory authorities in the region. For those of you who may not know FIFARMA very much or are not so clear about why we are supporting this initiative, FIFARMA is the Latin American Association of Research and Development on the industry of the pharmaceutical industry. We represent different local associations and pharmaceutical associations from the Latin region. And one of our work areas is the support to the consolidation of regulatory systems. FIFARMA is an active organization that is connected to the agendas of healthcare around the region, and we collaborate with both domestic and international actors to achieve a better healthcare for all Latin Americans. And we particularly focus on three major areas to driving studies and analysis that are robust and useful for the sectors of the healthcare ecosystem. We also associate with different organizations to develop joint projects that address the challenges of Latin America. Given our regional nature, teamwork is the distinctive seal of IFARMA. Each country has its challenges, and we try to be associated and allied at IFARMA, such as like we've done with INOS, to try to move the same way and to connect. This study, I believe, is interesting for all professionals involved, and we should be very satisfied, very proud, mainly FIFARMA, because it's about seeing the materialization of the three aspects that I was mentioning before. But in this case, for such an important area as the strengthening of regulatory systems, where we currently don't have that much information or that many studies of this kind. And this initiative is precisely pointing to meet this need of the countries to provide governments with robust and reliable information on practices that are applicable to pharmaceutical regulation throughout all its stages. This is also the first time that the regulated sector and the industry can provide their opinions about the main challenges faced by regulatory systems. And this is also the first time that a region proactively decides to address the recommendations of the World Health Organization on good regulatory practices and take them to the practice. And this study is undoubtedly a teamwork because it represents the voices of all the users, whether professionals, regulatory authorities, or the industry in all the 8 countries around the region. That is why I want to invite you to share this survey with all your members, your associates, and anyone who has direct work with regulatory authorities. But the main achievements will be in using these results to support governments in strategies to strengthen regulatory systems, which are a very important part of a country's healthcare system. I once again want to thank you for your attendance, for having heeded this call. And Carlos Felipe, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Diego, for this great introduction. Well, I think with what Diego has said, and I think you are well on topic. The point of this initiative is establishing an observatory of good regulatory practices. And the idea is that this is not only a one-time standalone experience or survey, but that we can kind of make it continuated, because continuous in the long term is one of the most important aspects. No association, no authority will be improving merely with one single study or intervention, but rather the possibility of having ongoing follow-up and tracking. That is why we're talking about an observatory and not a simple survey. We are trying to know about the perception and the experience of users, as was being said, of the different healthcare regulatory entities around the region in all the countries in relation to these 9 principles and the 8 facilitators of good regulatory practices proposed by the World Health Organization. So the objective in the practice, it is broken down into 4 more concrete objectives: the assessment of the perception of the stakeholders, you guys, which are the ones who directly interact with regulatory authorities. Then you have to adhere to these principles and these facilitators from your different agendas, and you understand where there might be opportunities for improvement or where there may be barriers. Also, second, identify the benchmarks for good practices. Third, identifying improvement opportunities in general and specific to the different agencies. And of course, for these results to be useful in supporting the governments and the different stakeholders. You guys, for instance, in this dialogue that should always seek to strengthen adherence to good practices to strengthen our regulatory activities. This is just a reminder that you surely know very much better than ourselves. Why the WHO has proposed the good practices, and it defines them as the good regulatory practices that are a set of principles and practices applied to development, application, and review of regulatory instruments to achieve the objectives of the public health policy in the most effective manner. This is a distinctive mark of modern regulatory systems that are receptive, science-based, which we would all want for all our respective countries. And for this the reason, the WHO has repeatedly insisted on promoting these principles of regulatory practices with the purpose of serving as a benchmark for the member states in application of good practices and for them to allow a solid and efficacious implementation to promote the systems in our different nations. So this is the general framework that you now know about, and something that we have wanted to specifically emphasize on in this assessment of how we are perceiving the option of facilitators and the principles of good practices in the respective countries is a quick reminder of the different principles, which are legality, coherence, independence, impartiality, and proportionality, all of them contained in the Exhibit B of good regulatory practices in the medical products regulation for 2024 from the WHO. This gives me the cue to start mentioning a very important element. Perhaps here what we're doing is fundamentally echoing a proposal or a recommendation issued by the WHO. As a think tank, we have not necessarily created or invented any type of benchmark, or nor neither the principles nor the facilitating elements. They are all as defined and proposed by the WHO. But what we do want is to close the gap of, well, okay, we have proposed them, they're on the table, but in the region, how can we really make their adoption a reality? That's when we really need to talk to those who are working in practice in this interaction to see how these principles are being adopted and the facilitators are being adopted in our respective countries.
Efficiency and transparency, and the 8 facilitators that are fundamental for things to happen, such as political support, and good governance, communication, collaboration, and coordination among institutions and inside them, quality of management, sustainable resources, ethics, values, institutional values, and the process that are for decision making and driven by science and data. Around these principles, we want to get to know the perception of those who are part of the stakeholders. And here we need to be specific. This is something that has a level of technical understanding that is very important. This is not an evaluation that we could, quote unquote, be open and do it to the general public. The fundamental element that will allow us to identify improvement, opportunities for improvement or bottlenecks or best practices is the one that comes from those that are using and interacting with the regulatory agencies. So here is to the national pharmaceutical labs, is represented in several of the associations that are here today, multinational pharmaceutical labs that are also grouped in the various national associations that collect them, that group them, and the consultants that give regulatory services to the pharmaceutical industry in the various countries in their different ways, and also the officials of the regulators, the national regulators, because they also need to be asked about their perception as to how their on own authorities adhering and adopting these principles and facilitators and all of them. For all of them, the invitation is to collect that perception of those who are part of that direct interaction with the authority. The flow for the call it was open on May 28th. You received back then the first invite and the first contact to start this deployment. This webinar today is for clarification purposes. Then we go in June and July that we're going to work, and this is the first big message with you and your support, and the first invitation to strengthen communication and have a base of users that is a lot bigger in all the countries. We will do that June, July. Now, closing this on August 5th, we will take September and August to, at the end of September, socialize the general report of these findings for the first phase of observation. The way we have created this strategy for information, we have sent this information to all the stakeholders of all 8 countries, different countries, and here the invitation is to replicate with your associates because you know, or your members, because you know that the denominations that they are associated or grouped in the labs, the national labs and multinational labs, they're changed. They're called guild, chambers, associations, whatever their nomination may be. The invitation here is to help us replicate directly with your associates and affiliates so that we can have the most significant sample as possible of those interacting. You know that the size and the number of those groups of interest in the various countries is different, of course, because our nations are different. We could not compare Colombia to the size of Brazil, for example. But the invitation, of course, anyways, is the more answers we get and contributions we get from the experts of the various associations, the more representative the conclusions are going to be for us to share with you and with the corresponding regulators from all the nations, all 8 nations, to make it easier, that job, to make the job easier, and the invitation for you to accompany the dissemination of this study and the creation of this observatory. We have shared with you a dissemination kit. Please change it if you want to change it 100%. But the intent is to make it easier for you to do that job and for you to be able to share that with your the members of your associations. And here is very important to say why we do this, because from INOS we do not have all that database of associates, and also because just regarding data custody for you is not easy to share the list of your members and your associates and the ones that should answer and were the best qualified to respond and participate in this study. So that's why we're counting on you so that through your dissemination and getting together and being part of the team of dissemination of the initiative, we can have the greatest number of answers as possible. So what you're going to find is that a pre-registration link is going to be shared, which will allow us to segment the countries and start organizing the answers by countries. During that pre-registration phase, you're going to receive in 24-hour stops the person who will register. They will receive the link with the invitation so that they can go and fill out the survey. It has basic information on the data of those persons, but the information all is going to be confidential. We're not going to share the data of the persons that are giving their answers. We're not going to give that to the regulators. They're all going to be private, but we do need some basic information so that we can segment and understand that the answers correspond to the specific country that we are going to assess. What is this job going to be good for? So that we can have a consolidate of how the way we look in the region, and in that line find in the region where those good practices are. Hopefully, we can find a lot and we can share them with all the region, and for them to become like the model to improve other regulators. And of course, for each country, in that comparison, for them to be able to understand where the opportunities for improvement lay. So that is an emphasis that we have wanted to place here. You know this very well. The way the best regulatory practices are conceived so that they can be a reference from the positive, from the way to do it, what we need to find. So that's why the results that we want to use is by recognizing the best practices. Here, we don't want to, create a classification or rank or, take out any of the agencies or regulatory authorities. No, the opposite. We need to find where the best practices are so that they can be shared. And of course, we need to identify where you interact with the authorities, and those of you who interact with the authorities of your associates can find these opportunities for improvement that need to be taken into account in your corresponding countries. That is going to be the result of this, and that is going to be published at the end of June, no, September, I'm sorry, so that it can be known by all of you, the authorities, and used the best way possible, as you may find inside your own countries, with what I think that brings us together, which is strengthening the way our authorities work. And at the end, as WHO says, that is really important to be able to achieve the public health objectives in our regions and countries, and we can, so that we can give our fellow citizens the best health service possible. That is basically the explanation and the invitation that we want to reiterate to you. And we have opened the floor for some questions. Here, the invitation is for you to use the microphones, raise your hands, and we are here to we're here to help you. I would like to highlight that you will always have your contact for questions, doubts, directly with the email of convocatorias hinos that you have received, and please feel free all throughout the process to share with us any concern, because the idea here is for us to be able to give you support on this task, that looking forward in socializing and improve dissemination of the initiative so that we can get the most significant results, so that we can bring them into the conversation that we want to have in each one of the nations. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to open the floor for questions or comments. I see Diego raised his hand. Yes, thank you, Carlos Felipe. I have been sent some questions, but you are the best one to answer them. The first question is, what is the estimate time to fill out that survey? Yes, thank you. We have designed the survey to flow easily. It's going to be about 20, 25 minutes tops. Now, Having said that, we would invite you to specifically a space that you're going to see after each one of the descriptors that we are proposing to evaluate the principles and the facilitators is that it is created. It's been created in all the blocks of the survey. There is a box for you to describe and share as you consider pertinent. And remember that it is confidential. The best practices, what you see is working, or the opportunity for improvement that you know, that you see that your regulator needs. That is a box that if you are generous enough to fill it out, you can, of course, uh, use more longer time there. But the invitation is for you to, hopefully, you can use it and share a lot of what the experience is in each country and in identifying the best practices and opportunities for improvement. Maria Lucia. Thank you. First, thanks to Enos for this wonderful development of all this, for developing this platform and the idea that's come true, that has been materialized. And I just want to invite you all to be part of this, to create the data that we need so that we can continue enriching our regulatory environment based on data. So that's why my invitation is to give objective answers, check if you have any questions, if you have any doubts, but be as objective as possible when you're giving us the answers, and follow up on your members so that we can get as much participation as possible for this statistical analysis and for this report with recommendations is as robust as possible, and so that we can build. This is just the beginning of everything we can do looking forward for our regulators to grow stronger and our region can grow as it's been growing. My invitation is to pour your heart out into this project. Thank you, Maria Lucia, for that comment. And just to reiterate that invitation, yeah, the heart of this study that becomes an observatory begins from getting the mo- as much participation as possible, and for it to be as generous as possible in the care that you exercise in giving the answers to the questions, and of course to share those best practices that you know, or the opportunities for improvement that you may have, that you may find as the regulators need to approach. I want to say that it is the exact same design and the same study for national labs and for multinational labs, as well as for the experts that are giving us support into the multinational or national companies, uh, and also for the regulators. It is the same one inspired in the WHO principle. So there is no influence or interest other than deploy an invitation that has been made by WHO. It was made several years ago. That is an invitation that is very well built with a lot of experts for that invitation to have in this observatory to find that tool that will give them the teeth to work and to follow up on us taking those best practices WHO is telling us to bring here so that we can have better actions. So now I'm going to read another question. Maybe you could elaborate as to what is the objective of the use that's going to be given to the results of the survey. It does talk about going closer to the authorities so that we can implement the best regulatory practices among the national agencies. That is a wonderful question. Diego, of course, when we close the study and when we have the report, we will of course, we will inform all the authorities, all the regulators, and in that information, of course, in that report, we're going to invite WHO because they are the first ones that need to get happy because we're helping them disseminate the regulation and the other multilateral stakeholder. And of course, are going to be willing to support that report in a direct manner on a one-on-one to one basis to all regulators in all the various countries. If you are today, we're here in Colombia, but if you are in Peru or if you are in Argentina, and as a result of the study, you find it useful for the study that the study will allow you to contribute to that conversation in your country with the regulators and the various stakeholders, of course, INOS will be more than pleased to accompany you in that conversation process and in that process to represent the report and how we can build it and whatever becomes useful for all 8 countries that we can make conclusions from. That will depend, of course, on you actually helping us getting a good number of contributions because the more significant that number of contribution is, very surely the easier it is going to be to talk to that regulator in the country you are located. That is fundamentally the objective for it to be known, for it to be used, and for it to be an inspiring process element and a propositional process so that your authorities and yourselves have the elements to continue to improve. I have another question, Carlos. And it says, I received the letter of invitation. I don't know, I don't have clarity as to whether I have to include that link in for my invites. Maybe you could clarify that flow. Yeah, and that link is fundamental because it gives you access or it allows us to create direct access to each one of the answers that are going to be that we're going to receive what we shared with you that collects and associates a significant number of those groups of stakeholders that we want to give a survey to. It's a kit for you to be a lot easier to have that process so you don't have to sit down and send an email, write an email, as but you have like the job already done. So the invitation here is yes, if you'd like it, you can use that kit. If you want to design it yourselves, of course, you go ahead and do that. But the important thing here is for you to help us here. The link is really important because it will generate the identification of each one of our countries and the segmentation that will allow us to not mix contributions and results from Colombia with the results of Brazil or Argentina. So that's why it is important to take that step, that little step, to go to the link with that basic information that we are asking there. By the way, there is a double role that all of you are going to play in that study. And the first one is support us in the dissemination with all your associates and affiliates. But the second one is you have to fill out that survey and that study and directly share with us the vision and the perception, the person or persons from your associations, the ones that you represent, in what the study is assessing.
Acá también y es ¿cuál fue la consideración para incluir estos 8 países?
Bueno, son las autoridades regulatorias. I have a question. What was the consideration to include these 4 countries? It says that these are the 4 regulatory authorities in the region that are the strongest or the most robust. So the notion, the criterion that we followed was precisely that to 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 try to make it broader even from what we've been able to learn. This has not been deployed in other regions, Diego. It's not been done in Asia, Africa, Europe. So perhaps this experience in Latin America, and when we should understand it as a joint project, it's a joint project of Latin Americans to support each other and to try to build better regulatory authorities. And I wish this sets the conditions for the WHO and other organizations to say, okay, this could be replicated in other regions precisely for this common purpose of humanity. And the purpose of the WHO is for all of us to move forward. Carlos, a colleague from Peru, is telling me that she wants to ask a question, but she's not being able to raise her hand. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Well, thank you. I have a question that is rather more related to authority participation and follow-up. You will be receiving some registrations from regulatory authorities, but do we have access to seeing whether the authorities are truly participating or otherwise to try to push from local organizations? That's one of the questions. And the other question is, the survey takes more or less 20 minutes, which is, well, it's not that quick, right? It's not that it's long, but it's not quick either. So the question is quite operative in nature because like that we're clear about the fact that as far as it advances, you can sort of save the progress and then resume later on. That's the question I had. Well, very interesting questions. First one, throughout the survey, you are going to find a save and continue button. So the invitation is to use it. And if you're using it, the questions will be in fact registered. And if you have to continue later on, well, you're not gonna get lost. What might happen that at a given time, you, for any reason, I mean, the lights go out or a computer is blocked and you maybe didn't save. If that would happen in a case that was not voluntary, but rather a connectivity failure, please contact us and we might be able to retrieve or to recover the point you were at, but you would need to contact us. So you should not have any problems to resume. That's first thing. The second question, I believe it's essential to see, and I'm going to try to replicate it. At first moment is to kind of push and to help with the dissemination and with the outreach. But then you're asking us, how can we follow up that on the fact that people are listening to us, in fact? And yes, if you will allow us, of course, for us, it would be very important to keep you up to date on what is going on as to the number of users. Of course, we cannot identify or share who they are, but we can say that we have been gathering a certain XY number of responses from their respective countries, including the national authority. So we can do it in an aggregated manner. I want to be clear, but we cannot uh, kind of transgress data privacy issues and talk about something specifically in ABC terms, but we can help you out in realizing how to strengthen some of this follow up to in your respective both organizations as well as the countries themselves. Thank you very much. Well, I have a last question around here. This study is open, and who can we share that with? Yes, you could say that it's an open study, yes and no. I mean, the study, when the people come in or whoever you share the link with goes in, they have to select the person or who referred them. So this study was referred to us by the certain organization from Peru or organization from Argentina or Mexico. For us, that referral is something that already tells us about a person coming to study. It might become that the link becomes viral and then lots of applications start coming in, but we'll try to screen that out through the profile. And we would need to understand that the person that was not invited by you but came in for some other condition meets the expertise and the closeness to the processes that are taking place with the regulatory authorities of the countries to truly ensure that it's included so that we don't sort of soil up the data that we're going to be gathering. Um, are there any other questions? Uh, I'm sorry, I didn't have my Leonardo Cepeda. My question is, I don't. Where would you go? What would be the point of contact with the agencies in this case? Are these e-addresses or how would dissemination of information work?
Preguntas de la encuesta.
Sí, correcto.
Lo que va a ocurrir es que ustedes
What's
y
going to happen is that you and your affiliates and your associates are going to receive a link, and there, when you click there, you're going to go into a survey. It is not going to be circulated on an email or through a format, but basically, you're going to go into a portal, and in that portal, you're going to find all the questions for the study.
Perfecto, gracias.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Leonardo. Okay, so I don't know if I may, Carlos, just a second, I would like to re-emphasize the fact that Enos has just shared on the chat box that link, and this is an official web page. So if you log into the Best Practices Observatory, you can get a pre-registration. You select your preferred language, English, Spanish, or Portuguese, and with that pre-registration, the link will be sent, which is a confidential and anonymous survey. That is that link that you find in the chat box. That's the one that is public and can be shared, right? Yes, that's correct. Okay, I don't see any more questions that I have received here on my chat box. Okay, great. So I think, again, I would like to thank you all. We're going to do two things. First of all, is to remind you we're open to any question, recommendation, or doubt. Our email will always be available to receive your questions. The second thing is that we're going to share this presentation so that you can have it. Number three, we're going to send a new communication sharing and highlighting the questions that you have asked today, the questions that you have made today. We're going to include them here so you can have them. And this is to Leonardo's questions. This is the portal that you're going to log in, Leonardo. So when you have received the link, you will go into this portal. Here you find the explanation, and when you start in that process, you're going to have some data, basic data collection. And from that point on here, you have the button that says save and continue that I said before. I'm going to ask Nico to write something, like for example, for to be used as example. So here we have the country. This is data that is really basic. And after that, we will go into the core and we go into the evaluation format. Here you will find the various principles. They're reminded to you, they are explained to you so that you can have a better and a more objective evaluation of principals and facilitators. And this will be the box where I have asked you to answer, to share those best practices and those opportunities for improvement about what is the aspect that we are evaluating. Then we have the saving button or continue, or the one that says continue or next, that will allow you to continue with the process, okay? Okay. Nico, thank you very much for quickly showing that so that you can see navigation is going to be very simple and that you're going to find it very friendly. Thank you all very much. And as I said, very soon you're going to receive a new email containing this presentation. Maybe we could share the link of this webinar, of the recording, just in case you have any questions. And third, an explanation about the recommendations that would give more clarity to the questions that you have asked today. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Hasta luego, gracias.
Dios, gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias, hasta luego.